This video is sponsored by you. Links to our channel are in the description, along with the Discord. Well, I guess I'm doing this again, and about 4 months earlier than any of you expected, if I had to guess. Year 3 is kind of a turning point for Arknights, because this is when the quirky Arknights operator kit design really starts to shine, and every operator has something unique to them that is worth talking about. Something else worth talking about is the fact that, let's be real, Arknights Global is not getting that official PC client because of Yostar, so you better get used to emulators, and boy, do I have one for you today. Mumu Player, yes, Mumu, like the operator, is perhaps the smoothest Arknights PC experience. Even if you are on a shitty potato MacBook that barely runs Roblox, you can find the settings here to lower Mumu's resource usage. Not just that, you can even enable things like root and change the device model. You can run games at a stable 4K 60 FPS. I was able to play H13-4, a stage notorious for putting devices on their knees, with a stable 60 FPS and no stutters to speak of. Just with a simple click, you can also make multiple instances, so you aren't even stuck to one model or one set of settings at a time. Perhaps the best part about it though is the complete absence of advertisements. You install, get the settings in order, get Arknights, which already has keybinds built in by the way, which are entirely customizable, and you're playing right away. Feel free to give Mumu a shot with the links in the description and pinned comment. However, before getting into the list, there are several balance patches to the previous one. Feel free to skip this part so you can get to the actual list. This video has chapters. Rosmontis goes up to C because of IS-5. Sora goes up to E. She's bad, but not F-tier bad. Just a little bag of trash rather than the whole dumpster. Plus, she has a pretty good module. Specter goes down to A. The 15 second of immortality isn't quite enough to justify S-tier on its own, especially when the alter does it better. Gladia, unfortunately, has to be moved up again to A tier. This is for 2 reasons, IS-5 ending 2, and the fact that Ulpianus is actually even better than I initially thought. He is like top 10 best units in the entire game at the time of writing, and Gladia, as his main support unit, needs to be bumped up. Angelina goes down to C. She's good, but not on par with everyone else in that tier. Also, her IS module is kind of a cut below all the other ones. Vanguard Texas goes down to B. She just isn't as widely useful as she once was, and you can mainly blame agents for it. Bagpipe goes down to S. Again, you can blame agents for that. She's still really good, but at the end of the day, both flag bearers and especially agents work fine on their own. Outside of extremely high-end circumstances, Bagpipe is a win more button. Not just that, but agents are arguably better than flag bearers in the first place. Myrtle and Elysium will not be changed, because Elysium has very powerful side niches, and because Myrtle is the single most used operator in the entire game in literally every single event, and I have to respect that. There is a reason for it. Nightingale goes down to A because Haruka skill 3 exists, which is literally just Nightingale skill 3 that also applies to physical and has a better skill cycle and uptime. Thorns goes down to A because while I do despise the Ave Mujica collab with every cell of my honestly quite attractive fanboy body, I have to recognize that Sakiko is really fucking good and basically just Thorns but better. Magallan and Meyer go down to E due to Raidian's release, who is a free unit, a summoner, and gives you exactly 0 reasons to ever use these two. Not that you had any reason to use Magallan before, but now it's even more evident. Rope goes up to E because of IS-5 ending 2. I know it might seem strange to bump up Rope a whole tier because of one use in one mode in one ending. However, let me remind you, to qualify for E tier, you need at least one, just one, actual optimal use in the whole game. Imagine someone like 12F to dodge Patriot Spears, or several 3-stars for the early IS modes. F tier, on the other hand, is for operators where you either really have to stretch it to find an optimal use for them, like Tsukinogi being useful exactly once 3 years ago in 1cc daily stage max risk, or I straight up cannot think of any optimal uses for them. Eunectes goes down to E. I was a little too favorable to her for just how immensely uncomfortable she is to use, and for how little reward she gives compared to modern DPS units, who on average are able to nuke Argentina with skill 3. Susurro goes down to B, simply because the medic class is incredibly stacked nowadays. Silence goes down to B for the same reasons. Schwartz goes down to C. She simply doesn't measure up with modern DPS standards. Even if she can perform well if you use her, DPS units in year 6 and 7 are so insanely good that I can't justify Schwartz in A. Pinecone goes up to A. I feel like I underestimated her last time, and now that 4 stars are free in IS-5 and IS-6, she has a quite strong place there too. Perfumer goes up to B for the same reasons. The Seaborn Spy Deep Color goes up to C for the same reasons. Click goes up to A for the same reasons. Futa Queen Beanstalk goes up to A for the same reasons. Ambriel goes down to D. Unlike other global damage options, she can't be used with you, and her targeting priority of targeting those with the lowest defense can screw you over very often. Archetto goes up to A because of her IS module, which is frankly pretty insane, giving her up to 3 more tiles of range for every other goober with offensive recovery in the team, and making it so her attacks also give SP to them, and also buffs them while she's at it, just for good measure. This works incredibly well with, for example, Hoderer Skill 1, another very good skill in high-end IS. Oh, and also Hoshiguma Alter Skill 2, which I hear is really good in IS-6. But yeah, this was recorded before Hoshiguma Alter and Haruka came out. Expect to see me a lot more because of it. Madrock goes down from EX all the way to A. This is because more and more content just stat checks her, be it high difficulty IS, CC, or sometimes even EX or S stages. She's still really good, but not EX. Vigna goes down to C. I overestimated her a lot last time, and for IS there is better vanguards like Beanstalk. Ifrit goes down to A simply because of the competition in the caster class. She has to compete with Logos's fat fucking chicks and Laplanalter's unemployment. While her range doesn't make her situational, as some people argue, it does make her just slightly less convenient to use compared to Aya. Platinum goes down to C. I don't know what the fuck I was smoking, putting her in the same tier as Blue Poison. I forgot about Toddifons last time. Completely. She's quite lackluster, and her talents are just kinda whatever. Not bad, however, so C tier. As for the rules, we will be assuming optimal circumstances. That means a hypothetical account which owns every operator in the game at optimal levels. This obviously is unrealistic. However, since Arknights is a gacha game, this is the only way to normalize rankings, as every account will look different. Remember that every operator is the best operator if you only have them to fulfill that role. Also, refer to this video. Arknights is so easy that you can use whoever you want. You can complete the game with every operator in the F tier in this video. 2. Don't take the tier list part of this too seriously. Conceptually, tier lists can never truly properly apply to Arknights. Hell, I have a whole video about it. Plus, with so many operators to rank, some placements will inevitably be out of whack. We begin year 3 with Indigo, who is actually quite good. Think of her as a ranged Ethan, in the sense that she is able to bind enemies. Honestly, out of every Mystic caster, she might be the best one, and that's a little embarrassing. With skill 2 and the module, she has a 75% chance to bind enemies with each attack. She also will not attack bound enemies, ensuring she can somewhat handle crowds. Unlike the other Mystic casters, she works because you are not using her for the damage, even though she does have pretty okay DPS, and because her niche isn't fucking sleep. She's not better than Ethan, but then again, who the fuck is? But a solid B tier nonetheless. Bena was the original Dollkeeper, and for some reason got one of the best skins in the game, despite the amount of people who actually use her being equal to the average room temperature in Siberia. On death, Bena is replaced with Annie, the doll. After a while, Bena will respawn. Dollkeepers are one of those inherently good archetypes, if you aren't verdant. Bena's skill 1 can be used for high defense enemies, and skill 2 for everything else. However, these skills harm her, which is a misguided attempt to make Annie come out. Make no mistake, this is not Specter Alter. Normally, you don't want Annie to come out, so this is purely a negative. However, Dollkeepers can find a quite strong niche as tanks, where you manage to hit the middle ground, where the damage can't quite kill the doll in time, meaning the operator just keeps respawning and just keeps tanking shit forever. This is useful for things like Faust or the Chapter 10 canon, for example. Bena in particular lends herself to this, as Annie takes 40% less physical and arts damage. All in all, she's a perfectly average operator, C tier. Kirara is kind of turbo ass, which makes me sad because she's playing Monster Hunter in her skin. She doesn't have the impressive damage of Mizuki skill 1 and Ascalon skill 2, and neither does she have the amazing stalling of Manticore skill 1, Ethan skill 2, and Ascalon skill 2 again. Instead, she focuses on survival, which is something Block 0 operators can do by default due to their trait, meaning Kirara's niche in survival is redundant, and she doesn't quite find any place in the ecosystem of the game because of it, unlike every other Block 0 E-tier. Carnelian is the worst 6-star in the entire game, and it's not even particularly close. You can watch this video for more details, but it's comical just how dogshit she is, making her our second ever resident of the what the fuck, what were you thinking, why would you do this tier. Just about everything you could possibly think of went wrong for Carnelian. She requires insane material investments. She is completely dogshit at DPS, absolutely awful at crowd control, and perhaps even worse as a tank. She heals herself on skill activation, but due to the Phalanx caster trait, she will immediately lose all the HP she just gained. Also, the SP during the overcharge is just gone if you activate it earlier. Also, she has some of the worst skill cycles in the entire game, with damage that is honestly pathetic. A lot of people say that my critiques of Carnelian can also be applied to Muinar. However, those people are lying and they don't understand the words coming out of my mouth. The difference is that Muinar is actively useful while he doesn't do anything. That is the main difference between the two. Carnelian, generally, unlike every other Phalanx caster, doesn't have any utility while she sits around. Pallas is one of the units in Arknights, definitely. Her skill tree has an insane SP cost for what it does, that being a mediocre buff and just okay DPS. Her skill 1 makes her a somewhat decent lane holder if you squint your eyes, but really there is no reason to use her, even though she's not as bad as most people say she is. D tier. Tequila is one of the extremely few 5-stars that are actually worth building, and I should have mentioned him in the 5-stars video. Imagine if Carnelian had an actual payoff for sitting on her ass for 40 seconds, instead of doing so little she might as well still be doing nothing. That's Tequila. While their damage is actually pretty similar on paper, Tequila has better skill cycles, and most importantly, his damage is not back-ended, making him much more reliable. Also, while sitting on his ass, he does have some utility, as a sort of Muinar diet version, taking aggro and dealing reflect damage. Also, activating skill 2 charged is a 40 SP cost, which coincidentally also happens to be the time to max out his trait, B tier. La Pluma is also one of the few 5-stars worth building. She's a very decent lane holder, gaining attack speed up to plus 36 with her talent. Skill 1 is her general use skill, and skill 2 is there for burst damage. All in all, La Pluma is a very reliable unit, though the fact she can't be healed does tend to get her stat checked, unlike FedEx or Enchinchilla, who have talents and skills to reliably keep themselves alive, B tier. Mizuki has a niche. He works with a blocker behind him as a reliable sub-DPS with skill 1. His DPS is actually on par with Ascalon skill 1, if not even better at higher enemy stats. However, unlike Ascalon, he is missing her several other incredibly strong uses, and he needs a blocker behind him, while Ascalon doesn't. Hey, SUPAH from the future here. It just occurred to me after recording the entire 50 minutes of this video that Mizuki has an IS module, and it's one of those really silly broken ones. He gets 50 attack speed and 4% max HP regen every second. You know, the Kirara special. But most importantly, he becomes a blender. He will suck in all the enemies in his range and keep them there. Especially with skill 2, which is his best skill with this module, he can hold like half the map on his own. In fact, in IS, he is way better than Ascalon. For that, he is in at least B tier. Chen the Chen Day was once a contender for the best operator in the entire game. Oh, how far the mighty have fallen. Honestly, I am glad. Someone named Holang Day should not be meta. Her main problem is that she has a flat defense shred, meaning her damage falls off incredibly fast compared to someone like Typhon, for example, and she doesn't have the damage to just ignore that defense like Ray does. This means that other DPS snipers are simply better options. Plus, her range is kind of awkward and she costs a lot of DP. Yes, in a game with Myrtle and agents in it, DP is not a real problem. But still, if you can, you want units with lower DP costs. Nowadays, I feel like if you're bringing Chen the Chen, you do it for the ammo buffs for Wishadel skill 3. Though, she does deal pretty good damage still, and her defense shred can be used by everyone. Plus, she almost halves enemy movement speed. She fell off, but she's still good, unfortunately. So, A tier. Roberta exists. She gives shields to other operators, which negate damage instances entirely, and that can be useful at times. But it's a roundabout way of keeping your operators alive, when there is operators that can do it in much more direct and reliable ways. Roberta herself can be a pretty okay tank with her skills too, even if she is extremely loud. C tier. Mulberry and Honeyberry will be ranked together as they are functionally the same fucking operator. I can't help but think the fact both of them have berry in their name is intentional. The main difference is that Mulberry is slightly better at actually healing HP, while Honeyberry is slightly better at healing elemental damage specifically. A alter kind of invalidates their entire existence, but they are good in IS at least, so B tier for both. I'd love to shit on Saileach as I usually do, but by virtue of being a flag bearer, she is at the very least A tier. Make no mistake though, skill 1 is carrying her ass up here. Skill 2 is frankly embarrassing, and skill 3 has a pretty okay debuff, being a sort of diet version Suzuran, but with mediocre DP generation. Her new module also makes up for the fact she is a 6-star, basically refunding the extra DP to deploy her instead of Elysium or Wanqing. A tier. Ashlock should have been a 4-star. She's not on par with even Fire Whistle, the other 5-star fortress defender. Ashlock gets the Brawler special, as in she attacks really fast at the cost of damage, which is not good due to how physical damage is calculated. However, skill 2 does have a very solid uptime and skill cycles, so she's not bad. She's just kind of okay. C tier. Fartooth makes me depressed to think about. Before the coming of the Antichrist Blaze Altar, she was the worst spook to get in standard and event banners. Skill 1 is horrible, Skill 2 is incredibly lackluster and should have definitely been an infinite skill, and Skill 3 needs to make use of her extended infinite straight line Futacock range to access its damage, meaning that the vast majority of stages in the game literally do not have a functioning tile for this skill. E tier. Justice Knight knows she's a robot. Her tiny niche is giving -1 taunt to all ranged units in her range 20 seconds after deployment, and making it so they apply 25% fragile to flying enemies. The -1 taunt would actually be pretty solid if it was on a skill rather than a 20-second one-time use thing. Let me remind you, robots have a massive redeployment time, meaning, without Chiave, this thing has an uptime of 9%. F tier. Pudding might have the simplest talent in the entire game, and you know what? She's pretty good too, especially now that 4 stars are free in IS. She's nothing to write home about, but not quite mediocre either, thanks to IS. B tier. Wildmane is so bad that even Frostbite tells you to not build her, which is a rarer event than getting struck by lightning. Charger Vanguards, if you aren't Bagpipe or Fang Altar, are kind of a lame archetype to begin with, and she gets nothing to make up for it. Her skill 1 is worse than Fang Altars, and her skill 2 has a push niche of all things. This is strange for 2 reasons. If the enemy does get pushed away, she just loses DPS, as she needs to wait for them to come back into their range. But if the enemy does not get pushed away, this small niche ends up not existing, and she's left with subpar damage. And if you do need the push, even Shaw would be better. Her module gives her a small niche to reduce guard DP costs, but why would you do that when you could just print that DP normally with a flag bearer or agent? F tier. Corroserum is worthless. Every time I think about him, depression statistics go up in real time. Skill 1 is pathetic and stuns him afterward for no reason, to the point I have to assume this is a sort of humiliation ritual, and Skill 2 has a silence niche with bad uptime and finicky range. Due to Lapland and Jaye existing, any uptime below 100% for silence is not good enough. F tier. Flametail continues our streak of underwhelming units. Her main claim to fame is being one of like 3.5 operators that are able to use those fuck-ass dodge relics in IS, which is about as embarrassing as having your main claim to fame be an Arknights YouTuber. She's Saga with a dodge niche and better damage. Her DP regeneration is kinda bad, her skill 2 SP cost is atrocious, but she does do something. I can't really call her bad. I'd argue she's slightly better than Saga, even. Surely better in IS, since she can use the fucking dodge relics. C tier. Nearl Alter skill 3 fell off by virtue that the vast majority of things you'd want to use true damage on can't be blocked, or if they are blocked, will just toss her into the sun. Thankfully, skill 2 is still as good as ever, sort of. She doesn't take deployment slots at the cost of an increased deployment time, but nothing unmanageable. She pales in comparison to the actual fast redeploys, but she's nothing to scoff at, and not taking deployment slots is often pretty useful. A tier, I'm a Nearl Alter truther. Kiara is complete dogshit, she's worse than Click. Her damage is mid, and her freeze niche only barely works. She really wants help from other cold appliers, and Gnosis is pretty much the only good one. And Pramanix Alter too, she did not exist when I recorded this. Did you know I recorded this 6 months ago? Yeah. Not to mention, she doesn't actually gain anything from freezing the enemies. F tier. Aurora is a duelist defender, and we share the same name actually, so there's a fun fact for you. To attempt to circumvent the massive issues with her archetype, she literally does not attack until she gets a certain amount of SP, which I guess is a solution. And once those skills are activated, they're still ass, unfortunately. Skill 1 has great uptime, but why the fuck would you ever use a duelist to be a tank? And Skill 2 only deals good damage to frozen targets, meaning if she doesn't have external support, she only deals good damage on 3 of her 9 bullets, which is very strange. In Arknights, debuffs like Stun, Levitate or Cold are applied before damage. This means that since Aurora has bonus damage on frozen enemies, she should deal her bonus damage on the second and third hits of each cycle, because the enemy becomes frozen on the second hit. However, just by observing her, you can see this is not the case. She only deals bonus damage on the third hit once the enemy is already frozen. I have no idea why this happens, but it's probably because freeze is not actually an applied ailment, but rather the combination of 2 cold stacks. Meaning, what I think is happening is that Aurora attacks, the cold stack is applied, the damage is dealt, and then the enemy becomes frozen, which is really strange and makes 2/3 of this skill entirely worthless. Hey, SUPAH from the even future here. I just realized Aurora skill 2 specifies that the enemy must be, quote, already frozen, meaning there is a chance it was straight up programmed to work this way specifically. And that makes it somehow even stupider. F tier. Gnosis is quite great, actually. Frozen enemies in his range will receive 60% fragile with skill 3, which, I shit you not, is the highest in the game by a good margin. The trade-off is that he only gives it for a quite small window of time. However, even then, it's amazing, and he himself is a great sub-DPS. On skill 1 and 2, he applies 30%, which is Saileach skill 3, by the way. Not just that, but if you introduce attack speed shenanigans into the mix, skill 1 can perma-freeze enemies. Oh, and he has his IS module, which is really good. A tier. Shalem is kinda hot and sort of okay. Arts Protectors are kind of an odd champ class due to the roll compression of a tank and an arts damage dealer not being super useful. Until now. But he can somewhat hold his own. Ultimately, you don't have a real reason to use him, and Hoshiguma Alter exists now. And the random targeting on skill 2 kinda fucks him over, so he's a D tier. 9-colored deer is an abjurer, and she doesn't have any meaningful niche, unlike Quercus or Silence Alter, which means her entire existence gets nullified by any medic, but especially incantation medics. And, Haruka. Which is entirely unironically the Wishadel of healing. I can't overestimate how good her healing is, and that she is by far the best healer in the game. Even if I do think overall Monstre is the better unit. F tier. Kroos Alter is another one of the extremely rare breed of 5 stars that aren't complete garbage. Her damage is actually very comparable to Exia, and way better at lower enemy stats. Plus, Kroos gets a stun niche, which is great in IS-3, for example, and makes her the natural predator of any and all low-altitude enemies. A tier. Blacknight is Beanstalk too, and like Beanstalk, she's pretty damn good. However, skill 2 is worth mentioning in particular. In normal content, it's good, but nothing to write home about. However, when we introduce SP buffs into the mix, it becomes what might just be one of the most broken skills in the entire game. No, I'm not joking. If you give her enough SP buffs, she can put enemies in a cross shape around the summon permanently to sleep. It also works on invisible, invulnerable, and untargetable enemies for some fucking reason. In IS-5 in particular, this is extremely simple to achieve with Lamp, as you get both the SP buff from Hand of Predation and the King Relic. B tier. Leah is okay. Against enemies with low weight using skill 3, he essentially has infinite block. He also finds a niche in any event that buffs push mechanics, like Lone Trail, though those are very, very few. In the end, his damage is quite underwhelming, and he only blocks 1, which means any enemy that isn't as lightweight as a literal anorexia patient will just come through. He also has a niche of being immune to abnormal statuses, though it doesn't come up much. D tier. Ling was also one of the contenders for the best operator in the game, and she appeared in my top 10 best operators list at 10th place. And let me tell you, she won't be appearing in the next one. This is because, like Madrock, more and more content stat checks her summons. However, unlike Madrock, you can reliably refresh these summons, so it matters a little less. With that said, the Dragon Fellas are just as good as a Block 4 AoE Arts Summon with status to rival a nuclear warhead would be, so A tier. Quercus gets looked past because she's an abjurer, and you know what? Fair enough, they don't really have a good track record. However, once you look at Quercus, she's actually pretty good. Her skill 1 is infinite, and truth be told, her HPS is not bad at all, meaning she is a somewhat competitive healer. Skill 2 has a very solid SP battery niche, with a moderate SP cost and giving 1 SP to every ally healed during the duration. This is quite good, as it is a third of Touch's talent, and no joke, Touch would be the best medic in the entire game if she was playable, and it wouldn't even be particularly close. B tier. Goldenglow is still quite good. You'd think Laplan Alter outclasses her completely, but no. For one, Goldenglow is a way better AFK caster with skill 2, and is one of the main strategies to cheese SSS. For 2, Laplan Alter doesn't have Res Shred, which is quite bad for Laplan Alter. This means that in IS, Goldenglow is actually quite a bit better, since she both has Res Shred and synergizes way better with attack speed buffs. You can watch this video for more details, but the short of it is that Goldenglow still holds up in modern content, and is sometimes even better than Lapland. Also you, S tier. Enforcer is without a doubt one of the units in Arknights. He's just a very painfully average pusher with a tiny stun niche. I'd love for him to rearrange my insides, but unfortunately he's a D tier at most. Kazemaru is another surprisingly good unit, and maybe I should have mentioned her in the 5-star video. When the Caminingyo is summoned, she will deal AoE damage in a 3x3 around her, which is pretty alright. Skill 1 is good in IS with relics like spinach or chocolate pasta. Keep in mind, however, that this is still better than the substitute, meaning that, just like Bena, this skill is made in such a way where it is trying to get the Caminingyo out, but you don't want that. On the other hand, skill 2 summons the Caminingyo alongside Kazemaru, which, as far as I know, is unique in the Dollkeeper class at the time of writing, to have the doll and the unit up at the same time. This not only gives her pretty good damage, but effectively extends her range to a 5x5 thanks to the substitute, B tier. Fiammetta is okay. I mean, it's unfortunate that she's the crying Wojak to Anduin's Giga Chad, but at least she works with the Hand of Rumble in IS-5, I guess. Other than that, her skill 3 is kinda finicky to use, and even then, it's not all that. Even if it's quite fun. I love Fiammetta skill 3. Skill 2 has pretty good cycles, but even then, nothing special, C tier. Chestnut is so disastrously bad, he is only rivaled by Concord. His entire existence is nullified not only by the fact that Eya Berry exists, but also because Honeyberry is a free unit, meaning there is no reason for a 5-star elemental healer to exist. But even then, once we concede that unfortunately he does exist, his healing is dreadful. F tier. Heidi is alright. In one of the previous videos I made a joke about her being bad, but honestly, she's not really that trash. Her talent too is actually incredible. It's Tilopsis but better, and you know where Tilopsis is on this list. Unfortunately, there's an asterisk. It only works in chapter 10 stages of all places. This leaves Heidi with an assortment of buffs that aren't all that. Her skill 1 gives 419 attack inspiration, which is pretty good actually. For comparison, this is double Scadialter skill 2. If it wasn't for the strange downside of giving everyone 3 less block on a very short duration. Don't get me wrong, it's good on ranged DPS, who don't care about blocking anyway, and on ground DPS you don't plan to be blocking, like Muinar for example. So in the end, I can give her a D tier. Rock has doubled rocks and double Kirara's damage, which puts her right around barely functional. I watched this Cookie Kaze video on her, and you can see her visibly struggling to keep up with the fodder enemies. For fun, I tried the same clear with Click, even removing Madrox's module, and it was essentially identical, with the exception that Click has a strong crowd control niche, and doesn't need to sit around for her talent to charge and her skill to go into overdrive, unlike Rock, whose entire theme is just sitting on her ass to power up. D tier. Horn is quite good. Her range can get quite finicky, but once you get it to function, she puts in the work. For example, for some reason she completely shits on IS-3. All 3 of Horn's skills are good in some way. Skill 1 is for AFK and invisible enemies, though keep in mind she needs non-invisible enemies to hit first. Skill 2 allows her to block and deal good AoE damage, which is not something the other Fortress defenders can do at the time of writing. And her skill 3 is her go-to DPS. Horn also gets a revive and a buff with that revive, which means very often you will use skill 3's self-damage to kill her on purpose. Some Lazarus type gameplay, if you catch my drift. All in all, B tier, just because her range can get quite finicky. Windfleet is one of those operators that I look at in the operator list while scripting, and I just go, I have to talk about this guy? However, I will say, this guy gets shit on a lot more than he actually deserves. He's a little better than most people give him credit for. Skill 1 makes him an SP battery. He can put up to 2 devices on the same guy, and each device will make 5 SP in its lifespan. However, keep in mind he needs to attack to trigger the SP, and the enemy needs to be in his range, meaning you need a pretty reliable influx of enemies to get the optimal SP. SP batteries are some of the strongest effects in the game, but Windfleet's just isn't reliable enough. Not to mention, he doesn't get his fucking devices back with this skill. Meaning, at absolute most, when being fully optimal, he will make 15 SP in the whole stage. In the end, he is several cuts below almost any other SP battery effect in the game. Also, each device will give a 20% buff to the unit it is given to, which is pretty okay. You can stack 2 of them for a 40% buff. Skill 2 goes all in on the attack buff, going up to 80%, which is comparable to Warfarin. However, both of his skills only work on casters and supporters for some fucking reason. Surprise, I didn't mention that before. Massively limiting his options more than Warfarin's random targeting ever could. Supporters only have Gnosis as a viable buffing target, pretty much, and even then, that's dubious. And Tragodia, though I am not sure how much value you actually get from that, since E2 level 82 with Module 3 is already enough for one skill to cat to apply paralysis on bosses, outside of IS or other modes like that. And even then, you could use Warfarin. And the casters are already plenty fucking strong enough on their own, they don't need the buff. Though, I suppose, Logos and Laplanalter are very good buffing targets. However, even then, the skill cycles and uptime on this fucking thing are atrocious. On paper, they look the same as Warfarin's, but keep in mind, Warfarin charges her skill while the buff is active, meaning by the time it ends, she already made 15 SP. Why the fuck did I talk so long about this guy? Eat here! Lumen is just a touch overrated. He's great, don't get me wrong, but nowadays with people such as Eya Alter and Monstre, you have less reason to use him. His gimmick of nullifying abnormal statuses doesn't come into play as often as you'd think, as most abnormal statuses can just be played around. Though his HPS is quite great, so if you do use him, it's not like he's bad. So A tier. Irene got tragically mogged by Degen Breaker, and even if Degen didn't exist, Levitate is kind of a meme in this game, and her skill tree hits random targets. Not just that, it deals a fixed amount of hits, which means it doesn't synergize with attack speed buffs. She deals the most damage to airborne enemies, which synergizes with the Levitate. However, the skill lasts just a bit longer than the Levitate itself, and since the targeting is random, it means a lot of hits will not go towards your intended target while they are airborne, and she'll waste those hits once they are grounded. All in all, C tier. Finally, we conclude Year 3 with Specter Alter. This is the part where I would agenda post that she needs insane investment to be worthwhile to use, but we are assuming optimal circumstances in this video, so it doesn't matter for this list. And once you do build her, she's quite good, despite being a dirty Abyssal Hunter. Her damage isn't the best, but it is reliable. She gets 20 seconds of immortality rather than 15 on skill 2, and her doll is pretty damn good, reducing enemy movement speed by 40% and dealing some decent tick damage to them, meaning skill 2 doesn't actually have a downside. However, you can really feel that she blocks one less than her original counterpart, and that she doesn't hit all blocked enemies outside of skill 3. I think I'll put her right with the original in A tier, even if, all in all, I'd argue Specter Alter is a little better. And that's all. Maxed out your gummy. Bye. Ho ho ho, merry, jolly, good festivities, jolly merry, holidays happy, hip hip hooray, Merry Christmas, or Christmas Eve for the channel members. About said members, actually, special thank you to the last chef, Jinjinx and Tuna, god that's fucking surreal, Vinko Ching, Ilio, Living Shad, Camille of Wishadel, Crayon Box, F. Ramn, The Lord of All Magic, URL Killer, Dievius, Kino, Bomb Ninja, Good of Leon, Apollo T, QX102, Mr. Lair, The Animal Raptor, 1K, Never Far Off, Zephyrinix, Nupo, Lizard King, Nemotic, Sebistm, San Kenshi, DTK Skykill, Kevin McQuire, Chromala 5QTZK, Porato Chipu, Genius Gay Shipper, Sulfur 7, Maxios S, Camon Hiren, Larmendra, Prancing Peppers, Radio Nuke Unio, Yuvune, King of Harems, That Guy with Two Names, and Kamui. Well, I guess I'll see you next Christmas for the year 4 video, right boys? No, surely I can put it out sooner, right? Surely. Bye.